for me and for this opportunity to share academic and personal observations and insights into the current ongoing Israeli war on Gaza since October the 7th, 2023. So thank you again, and it's my pleasure to be with you and with all colleagues here. So far, it's almost 4 months of Israeli annihilation, Israeli genocide, Israeli war on the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. The analysis and the findings I'm presenting today are still a preliminary reading of Western media coverage of the Gaza Strip and far-reaching geopolitical implications for the region. No, sorry. Yeah, so the analysis and the presentation today is about a study that I'm still doing, and it is entitled "Manufacturing Public Opinion and Engineering Western Audience." Possibly, I would like to give some insights into the international media reporting of the Israeli war on Gaza. Still, the war is happening, and we have like today almost 4 months of this the genocide. The genocide or the war has unfolded in Gaza with the tragic humanitarian consequences for the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And of course, this war has implications not only in the Palestinians in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Jerusalem, but also in the war has implications on the region. And I think, like I would say, it's in all world politics as well. So this is like the the map of Gaza. We have here two crossings of Gaza, Eretz and Rafah crossing. And also we have two main cities, Gaza City and Khan Yunis City. Khan Yunis City is in the south where I come from, where I was born and I grew up. And where are the current Israeli military operations take place, actually. And we'll see, like in a minute, how my house in this city has been demolished. Of course, the war, as I said, has political implications in the whole region. And for this war, of course, media is very important. And not only has the Western media been sharply sidetracked, like, being sided to one side of the coin, to the Israeli point of view. Also in its framing, in its discourses, in its the way how the Western media covers the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general, and the Israeli ongoing war and since October 7th. So it's not about the framing, it's also the role that Western media is playing or has been playing in spread of disinformation rooted in undocumented, contradictory, or false narratives. Generally speaking here, I would say I don't want to take a long time speaking about the role of media in general, but media influences how people see the war and conflicts from certain agenda. Of course, media is a powerful tool to hold governments accountable. Media is powerful in reaching the masses around the world. Of course, with the critical information, with open eyes to new perspectives. Like what perspectives does the media present to the people, and of course, in what ways? So this leads me to say, alongside the physical war or the invasion or the ground war, there is a war on media. There is a media war, and there is a communication war. Um, of course, in general, there are certain values, principles that each journalist should commit to, and of course, the news agencies. And these, I think, like, of course, even though they are still general, but I think they are very important for the role of Western media in covering the current war. So accuracy, independence, impartiality, humanity, and accountability. And I don't want to start my argument or my claim that these values, these principles of media or of international media, mainly the Western media, I would say these principles are mostly lost, you know. Um, of course, international media has a big role in war reporting and how people views the war. Um, so for the roles of the media, the international media is to educate people, to develop psychological aware, of course, to support certain narratives and views, and potentially to influence governments and international organizations, and as such can have an agenda setting effect. This means that arguably saying media or news media has media setting agenda, you know, as we will see in a few minutes or in this presentation. And of course, it leads to manufacture public opinion during wars, manufacture engineering the way a media or a news story is built to reach masses, and of course, to affect the perception, to affect the opinions of people. I don't want to spend long time here, but as we see, like international media source has or have international media sources have an agenda setting effect by creating awareness on the wars. And of course, there are like pro and against, pro and anti actors, weak and power actors. And power actors means the actors, the journalists who have like powerful, high or senior positions of dominance. We will come to this slide later when we talk about the challenges facing the Palestinian journalists. But in general, in a general assumption, um, by academic studies or by some findings that claiming any correlation between the great amount of death and destruction, the more attention the media will pay to the conflict. To some extent, this is true, but what we see in the current Israeli war in Gaza, this is not always true, because despite the large number of Palestinian civilian casualties, still the Western media or international media is reporting and loyal to the Israeli narratives of the whole story, ignoring the Palestinian views and narrative. So it's not always there is a correlation between the amount of death and destruction and the attention of media, and this would lead me to focus on the public opinion and how it matters to shape minds and will of people toward a political understanding, toward a political views on the current war. From my previous studies here, I would like just to reflect quickly on previous studies about the role of Western media on Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Of course, the general way is that the overview image, it's a war against Hamas. This is how Western media usually focuses its reporting, just focusing on one group of the Palestinian, as we see in the current war. My PhD was about the international media reporting of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, mainly the war in 2008 and 9. And the general finding I reached is that the overview, the war is directed against or targeting Hamas only. And also, there is no much difference between liberal and conservative newspapers or in media, and which is like usually we understand that there is difference. There are no similarities between liberal and conservative. If we take New York Times and Washington Post, for example, and they how I don't say like they fight, but at least the gap between the two spectrum. The two newspapers are very is very, very, very big. But when it comes to Palestine, the whole story is different. There is no difference. So both the liberal and conservative newspapers share the same news resources, or say share or defend the same Israeli narratives, and rely on or actually portraying the whole image of the war as if it is only a humanitarian rather than political. And this would reflect on the decisions or the political agenda of the governments, as we will see how the international community and the engagement of the international community in the current war is basically based on humanitarian solution rather than finding um, a political solution. Of course, in the coverage of Western media, there is a lack of objectivity and more bias to Israeli viewpoint of the conflict. And some aspects of the bias we can see, Israel-Gaza conflict or Israel-Hamas conflict. It's not like Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So limiting or determining the whole, or limiting actually the conflict either only with Gaza or with a group within Gaza, which is Hamas. Israeli-Palestinian violence, occupied territories, and so on. So there are many discrepancies of and in referring to the conflict. Uh, in such regard, in this study, I rely on a theory like what's called manufacturing consent theory by Edward Herman and Naum Chomsky. Might be very old theory, but I think this one is still valid and is still applicable to study and analyze the coverage of international media coverage of the wars in the international media. And by engineering, I mean like design stories, build narratives, and use of engines. And here the engines are the media outlets. They are different engines. And the structures could be linguistic structures, could be discursive structures, and could be general frames of the war. So this media theory holds that contemporary democratic public opinion is merely an illusion. The media provides the public with the information and facts selected by the politicians and centers of power, and then the elite shape public opinion through the media, manufacture fragile pluralism to give it the air of legitimacy. And actually, this is like what's happening exactly now in reporting the Israeli genocide of Gaza. Um, Basically, Of course, Hamas has been known since its establishment, but I think like since October the 7th, the interest to know who is Hamas and who Hamas is and what they believe. I think like I would like to share this slide about Hamas just to give general concept about who is Hamas. Hamas basically is rooted in the Muslim Brotherhood, and it is established in during the Palestinian First Intifada in 1987. Um, Hamas has won the Palestinian legislative elections in 2007 and 2006, and I think this is like it was a turning point for Hamas to enter into the Palestinian politics. Winning the Palestinian elections in 2006 give Hamas legitimacy and support by many Palestinians, of course. But this win was not much welcomed, or it was not at all welcomed by the United States, by Israel, and by many European or Western countries. And this was, like fighting for democracy, and then what do we need? Like if like a political group has won the elections, why is it fought? Why is it targeted or prevented from taking actions or taking a chance at least or opportunity to roll or to rule and to be in government or to establish a government and um, like to help its community. In 2009, Hamas declared its constitution, like changing or updating, or you can say developing its founding character, where Hamas shows pragmatics and more availability and more chances and opportunities to go in further into Palestinian politics, the internal and of course internally and externally. Um, Here just I quote how Hamas represents itself in its charter. So it's like a unique Palestinian movement. It owes its loyalty to Allah, derives from Islam its way of life, and strives to raise the banner of Allah over every inch of Palestine. So Hamas is considered as a social movement, a mass socio-political movement, and of course by Western or by USA, by many countries, is regarded as a terrorist entity, and by also it's regarded by also a liberation movement that considers jihad for liberation of Palestine is obligatory. And this is like how we understand some thoughts of Hamas. This is like and I think like this is kind of like understanding who Hamas is and the way Hamas thinks. I think this would be a base for understanding the events of October 7th and what leads Hamas to at least some part of Hamas, not all of Hamas, because like there are different spectrums of Hamas, and I think the Hamas was much involved into political government in Gaza, in alongside the military wing of Hamas, which is known as the Brigades of Al-Qassam. In October 7th, 2023, actually we woke up, we awoke up to a significant development internally and externally. You know, Hamas initiated an unprecedented invasion. You know, it was a big surprise, it was a big shock not only for us in the Gaza, but I think like on all for all Palestinians, and I think maybe like for the whole world, if I'm not exaggerating too much. But anyway, it was a surprise. It was a big invasion. It was a big turning point in the Palestinian-Israeli relation. We have to admit that Hamas invaded the Israeli settlement surrounding the Gaza Strip. They could stay there for 3 days, and I think uh, it was like a surprise even for Hamas militants or Hamas members who could enter or could invade the settlements. But this move or this initiative, whatever we call it, it's a move or initiative or target or attack. In the Palestinian view, the events are seen as a response to the prolonged, to the long-term Israeli siege on Gaza. For somebody like me, it was easier to come to the United States or to come to Germany or to go wherever in the world rather than to cross the Eretz crossing and go to the West Bank, which takes like 15 minutes, you know? And that was the problem. And maybe there is no enough context around October 7th. Also, uh, people don't talk about how much the Palestinians in Gaza suffer from the Israeli siege, restriction of movements, electricity, just only 4 hours a day of electricity, the water, the high rate of unemployment, and so on. There are many effects and many impacts of the Israeli siege on the Palestinian in Gaza. In retaliation, Israel launched an attack, or actually attacks, not an attack, it's just, many attacks on the Gaza Strip, targeting infrastructure, hospitals, schools, shelters, mosques, basically every single facility in the Gaza Strip was targeted, or has been targeted, and still the targets going on, the attacks or the aggressions are still going on, so it's not that like for a day or 2 days. Now, as I've said, we have almost 4 months of Israel aggression on the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. I just here quote according to the United States, according to the United Nations, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is beyond catastrophe. So people think it is like a catastrophe, what is natural catastrophe. It's beyond that, I would say it's man-made catastrophe. Worsening every day. Every day, the catastrophe worsens and worsens and getting bad and bad and bad. In 3 months or now in 4 months since the conflict began, Gaza became a place of death and despair. And that's really true. People are desperate. People are not really, people don't know what's going on because the attacks, there is no single safe place or anybody is safe. Every single place is potentially target of Israeli army. Here also people of Gaza are being forced into a horrible scenario. I mean, the cruel campaign by Israel against the population of the Strip. And for these images, this is where I live actually, and you can see here the target of the infrastructure and the Israeli soldiers going into the main street of my area in the neighborhood where I used to live and to play as well when I was a kid and to go to my place of work in the Gaza. So you can see they bombed the mosque here, they bombed the houses, they only they destroy the street, the road, And here also, so people are shocked with all these retaliation and, actions and aggressions. And here we have like just general statistics or infographic on the statistics of the Israeli genocide issued by Euromed the Humanitarian Rights. Now we have like almost over 30,000 people killed in the war. And where do we see this? In which war? At least in the last maybe 20, 30, 40 years. And over 60,000 people got injured in the war. And so these statistics are available on the internet. And here we refer to the displacement rate into Gaza, and this is published by BBC. So 1.9 million of Palestinians in Gaza are displaced. Israeli army forced people in the north and in the Gaza city itself to evacuate first to middle area and to the south. And then when the ground invasion raised and went further into Gaza, again, the people were asked to re-evacuate again to the south, further into the south. And now all Israeli military operations take place in Khan Yunis. So people in Khan Yunis evacuated from the north, the Khan Yunis citizens, and the people evacuated from the north and middle area, evacuate once again to Rafah. And what we hear in the news that Israel wants to conduct military operations in Rafah. So we can see like here in October 2000, last October, almost 123,000, and then October 12th, 13th of October, until December 4th, almost 1.9 million people evacuated and escaped actually to a safe place, but there is no any safe place, as I have said. And this is like a map of the destructions in Gaza. So we see like in the north here, Jabalia, and it is one of the most intensive and most populated camp of refugees in the Gaza Strip. And you can see that this destruction rate in Gaza City and in Khan Yunis and also in Rafah. As if we look at the map in general, you can see like, the destruction is everywhere or taking place everywhere in Gaza. So the destruction is not only for homes and infrastructure, but also for universities. Israel systematically destroys the higher education institutions in Gaza. And this is the latest Israeli attack on Isra University in Gaza. And it is one of the most beautiful Gaza institutions. And also, Israel has purposefully targeted the Palestinian journalists. Now we have almost or over 130 Palestinian journalists have been killed by Israelis. And they are not only targeted individually, but unfortunately with their families. So many journalists have lost their lives, have lost their family members, have lost their homes, places, And of course, working in Gaza as a journalist now is really, I would say it's not that easy. It's like playing with fire. To such a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, of course, there is there has been international response to the war, to the Israeli genocide for Gaza. So this ongoing tragedy, catastrophe has garnered desperate global reactions. Some regions, some countries neglect the catastrophe, while others focus slowly on the humanitarian aspect. But from my point of view, the major international response has been mostly the humanitarian response, as if this is a natural catastrophe. There is no much focus onto the politics or political solution. All these solutions that we see in Europe, in the West, in the international organizations, in the UN, has these solutions mostly focus on the humanitarian situation. It's very, of course, it is very important, but still, it's not enough because the conflict or the issue, the catastrophe is not only humanitarian, it's also political. So the humanitarian solution is important, but it's not the only solution or response that we should face or that we should find or see. We need to see a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Recently, as we heard of the International Court of Justice order, to many, it's considered as defeat for Israel. But I would say for Palestinians, what is missing is the direct and immediate call for a ceasefire. Unfortunately, this call for a ceasefire is not mentioned, it's not ordered by the ICG. Of course, many claim that this call is indirectly issued or ordered by ICG, but still, if we compare it to the Russian-Ukrainian war, it was clearly mentioned and ordered to the Russian government that must stop the war on Ukraine. But when it comes to Israel and Palestine, or Israel and Gaza, there's like a hidden way or indirect way to call for a ceasefire. We don't, as a Palestinian, and to many Palestinians, we don't understand such double standards. Even in the international law or in the in the international organizations, we could understand it in the international media, because there are political interests, but to the top, to the ultimate goal, we did not understand, or we were not really we were shocked actually with such decision of the ICJ. Still, it is still important, but I think it is not really enough. Here, just I don't want to read it all, but the state of Israel shall, in relation to Palestinians, you see, like the way language is used in relation to Palestinians, ensure that it's military, as well as any irregular armed units or individuals which may be directed, supported, or otherwise influenced by it, and any organization and blah 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 which may be subject to its control, direction, or do not commit any acts described in 4 and 5 above. What does it mean do not commit? What we see that Israel is committing each day, I don't want to say exaggerate each minute or at least, but on daily basis, Israel is committing acts and attacks against the Palestinians. So why such confusion language used by ICJ? The state of Israel shall take effective measures to prevent the construction and ensure the preservation of evidence related to the allegations of acts and so on. The state of Israel shall submit a report to the court on all measures taken to give effect on this order within 1 week from the October date, from the date of this order, and therefore and thereafter such regular intervals as the court shall blah blah blah, and the state of Israel shall refrain from any action and shall ensure that no action is taken which might aggravate or extend the dispute before the court or make it difficult to resolve. Reading the whole order of the ICJ, there is no any any call, any order for immediate ceasefire to the Israeli war and aggression on the Palestinians. So this is like kind of like a general and brief context for the Israeli ongoing war. And here I come to the questions that I would like to highlight here in this presentation. What are the Western media strategies of engineering consent to shape certain public opinions? And how do international media frame the Israeli genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza? And how does media coverage impact how the public perceives war? What conclusions can we learn from such um, uh, coverage? Here is like as I said in my introduction, this is still a preliminary reading of the analysis of the Western media coverage. I don't focus on one specific media outlet, but I have been following the reporting and the coverage in different media outlets. One general one general agreement, one general label of the war is Israeli-Hamas war. You know, in Palestine or by Hamas, it's called the Flood of Al-Aqsa. And this label, this title, has never been used by any media, any Western media outlet, up to my knowledge. You know, I've never seen it. When I read any news report in any international or Western media, I don't see the label or the name proposed by Hamas or by Palestinians. You know, it's always referred to the Israeli-Hamas war, and this would portray the whole war is targeting only Hamas. And of course, label is a political act that aims to identify the inclusion and exclusions of the others, what to include and what to exclude. And this is part of the discourse analysis. Portraying the war is only against Hamas, while ignoring the suffers of the rest of the Palestinians. And of course, Hamas has made attacks in Israel on October 7th. So any Israeli reaction or retaliation would be justified and legitimized. Here are examples of like how Western media headlines. So you see here, like in AP, Israel-Hamas war. In CNN, Israel and the Israel-Hamas war. Here, NBC News, Israel-Hamas war in news. Even I was shocked with the Al Jazeera English, because in Arabic they said the flood of Al-Aqsa, but in the English version of Al Jazeera it says also Israel-Hamas war, and of course, you know, there is. But here is just an example. These are just examples of headlines in the way international media outlets report Gaza. So one is about labeling the war. Another issue is, repeating the Israeli claims that Hamas beheaded 40 babies. You know, of course, the Israeli Prime Minister has distributed and disseminated such false narratives and such claims. But then the problem is that the Western media outlets, took these claims and kept repeating them. Even the Israeli newspapers, Haaretz and um, other newspapers um, did not say any evidence, or did not show, or claim that there is no any evidence that Hamas has beheaded any babies, but still the media, even did not apologize, but still, kept repeating these claims. One here, in Fox News, at least 40 babies, some beheaded, found by Israeli soldiers in Hamas attack village. Another by CNN, spokesperson of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Wednesday the babies and toddlers were found decapitated in Kfar Azza. So these are, even the Western media or some Western media outlets do not report directly, but still they repeat the claims of the Israeli responsibles and Israeli officials. Another way of leaning to the Israel narrative, Israel claims that Hamas fighters raping hundreds of Israeli women. So it's like here we see also adopting the Israeli narrative of the or Israeli side of the story, BBC said here a report, several people involved in collecting and finding the bodies of those killed in the attack told us they had seen multiple signs of sexual assault. And here in AB, new signs emerge of widespread sexual crimes. On CNN or Gaza, Israel Gaza, Hamas raped and mutilated women on 7th October, BBC hears. It's like kind of adopting the Israeli claims and allegations on the Palestinians. I think like one major issue in the whole conflict is the theme of tunnels. Israeli, of course, boasts or reporting Israeli narratives on the tunnels. These are they are not secret that Hamas has tunnels. But what has been narrated in the media is that Hamas uses the tunnels under civilian facilities like hospitals, schools, and universities, and so on. Just briefly, I would like to say Palestinians or Hamas or other Palestinian factions, they do not build, they did not build the tunnels on October 7th or just, in 2023. The tunnels have been considered as a lifeline for the Palestinians since 2006, when Israel imposed a strict siege on Gaza, because people were in need for every basic life necessities. So they started thinking of alternative ways. So one way was to build tunnels, firstly in 2006, under the border between Gaza and Egypt. And then in 2008, in 2012, the tunnels become really a lifeline for people to smuggle food, milk, animals, petrol, everything was smuggled through Egypt, through the tunnels from Egypt. Of course, some tunnels, no one can deny that, some tunnels were used for military purposes. But then, like these, these tunnels were not, built in a month or two, or, I think these tunnels were built for years and years. But I don't think the military tunnels are used or are built under any civilian facility in Gaza, because there is no any purpose for these tunnels to be built um, under the civilian facility. Of course, we understand these tunnels would be built alongside the borders in some certain areas, close to the borders, Um, but anyway, the role of media reporting these tunnels, were kind of for us shocking, So here BBC says Israel targets Hamas's labyrinth of tunnels under Gaza and means under Gaza. You see, like the language? This means like every single part or space in Gaza has a tunnel. I don't know, like if we have like underground city or Gaza Strip, in the Gaza Strip, how does, so it's like the people who are not aware of the whole context and reading such news headline will think, oh, Hamas has built another city, underground. And I don't know, like Hamas has been, or Palestinians have been under siege for 17 years. And of course, the siege comes in the context of Israeli occupation since 1948 and the many wars that we have, the Palestinians and have. And he also, I don't want to read these, but Al-Shifa Hospital here, for example, where the tunnel discovered by Israel, built by Israel. And it's like, because the hospital, the Ashifa hospital, the main and biggest hospital in Gaza, was basically built during the Israeli occupation of Gaza before 2005, it was the main, and, they are like corridors, of course, under the under some buildings of the hospital. So can we consider these corridors as tunnels? And I think like Israel or Israeli army is much aware of these corridors in the Al-Shifa hospital mainly. But anyway, Israel claims that Hamas or Palestinians have tunnels under each single part of Gaza. Anyway, one way of leaning or adopting or loyaling to the Israeli narrative is what we know the embedded journalism. And this is another way to understand the role of international media in reporting the Gaza war. Of course, embodying embedded journalism happens not only in Gaza, but of course in other wars like in Iraq and Ukraine and etc. But here, the embedded journalists accompany only the Israeli army. There is no way for any journalist, an international journalist, or even actually Palestinian journalist, to accompany any militants in our fighters in Gaza. So basically, the embedded international journalists accompany the Israeli soldiers and officers. And of course, I would claim they narrate the details of what happened only from Israeli views, only from the Israeli perspective and under the Israeli censorship. There's no way for embedded journalists to be away or to report something that the Israeli army does not want. And mostly, if we read the news articles by the embedded journalists or reporters, they focused on the grief of Israeli families. And I should say that Israel so far has not allowed any foreign journalists or international journalists to enter Gaza, to report from Gaza directly. And thus a vital aspect of the story is missing. Anyway, these are like kind of texts that has been yes, like these are examples of the way embedded journalists report. Um, of course, in such media coverage, I would say there is undermining Palestinian voices and facts. And here, the way they refer to the Palestinian casualties, to the Palestinian civilians, they refer to them as numbers, unfortunately, like 30,000 of Palestinians were killed. And then once they refer to these numbers, they refer them as numbers or statistics by Hamas. And this would imply kind of doubting about the facts. Many news reports, many new international media outlets say that, according to Hamas officials. So this would make some doubt about, the number of Palestinian kills. And in international organizations or international media outlets, actually, there is always the question, that when a Palestinian academic or Palestinian politician or Palestinian expert is interviewed, the first question, do you condemn Hamas? Is Hamas a terrorist group? I said, why? Why do I, as a Palestinian, do you agree or don't agree? This is not like to reflect my views on Hamas by starting an interview with a question of condemnation or labeling a group in a specific way would make the whole interview or the whole report contradictory and with much more biased, and this would definitely reflect an accusation of this. These are just examples of different examples of the interviews by Boris Morgan, and he is known in his attacking the Palestinians or pro-Palestine activists. For example, he started with Jeremy Corbyn. He started his review, or one of the questions, do you condemn Hamas? Is Hamas a terrorist group? And so on. So I don't think this is is this like a propaganda or it is journalism? This is the question. Here quickly about the linguistic analysis, and we find the conventional language, contention and choices of words, the way the missing unity in terming the Israeli word, you can't see, or we don't see like terms like slaughter, massacre, genocide, apartheid, ethnic cleansing in reporting Israeli war in the international media or Western media outlets. There is a big missing context of the October 7th. People or the Western media reports the October 7th as if the war or the conflict between Israel and Palestine started. This is like the starting point of the conflict without referring to the Israeli siege or to the Israeli occupation. They've never say that this or Hamas attacks or Hamas actions come as a response to the Israeli siege or Israeli occupation, to Israeli treatment of Palestinians in the West Bank or in Jerusalem. Here I quote for Noam Chomsky, maybe like some have seen, you take my water, burn my olive trees, destroy my house, take my job, steal my land, imprison my father, kill my mother, bombard my country, starve us all, humiliate us all, but I am to blame. And this means that, international media or, Western politicians would blame the Palestinians for any reaction. With such a quick analysis, I would say quickly the ongoing Israeli war has been framed as a self-defense, that echoing or repeating Israeli talking points, Hamas using civilians in Gaza as human shields, and this would, justify the high number of killed children, women, and Palestinians. A two-sided conflict. This is like between parity between the occupier and the occupied. And of course, Hamas has always been referred and framed as terrorist group. What we learn from this coverage is the continuity of Western media bias to Israel. There is a damage of credibility of a news agency. We learned about the values and the principles of at least Western media and how they fight for or request or claim for democratic and impartiality and objectivity. But I think what we see is like exactly damaging the credibility of news agencies in reporting the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general and the Israeli current war. Of course, language has an ideology, and of course, it has a big power to influence and engineer public opinion and audiences. There is no consideration for journalistic standards, just repeating what Israeli claims. There's no verification. There's a lot of misinformation. So the danger of such frames is that it tells the audience not only who is the victim and who is the villain, but also who is worthy of grief and sympathy and who is not. Like to get support for certain audience over the other. I think such claim or such reporting of the Gaza war would add to the challenge that Palestinian journalists face. One is like working as a journalist is like digging self-grave in Gaza, facing killing, targeting, and family loss. No internet good connection to access, and Palestinian journalists face will have no enough tools like cameras. They mostly report using cell phones. No protection, no safe place, no one is safe, and starving for starving for basic necessities of life. Like working as a journalist, and it's like rather to write a report or to write a news article or to go live with with the channels. Journalists starve to find food and, of course, safe shelters. What actions should we take? I think we need to find alternative coverage, alternative ways, and I think social media is visible for more and for deeper views on the Israeli war. We need to more efforts to shift international public opinion. We need to get more people to engage in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and of course to call for immediate ceasefire in Gaza. And of course, we need to consider awareness of the roles of weak and power actors. I would like to say this is an ongoing war between Israel and Palestinians, and part of that is an informational war. Media war is important, is as important as and sensitive also as the ground invasion of the other war. It is, of course, there is a lot of propaganda war, and then we should raise awareness of the claims here and there and the arguments, and of course, the allegations and the narratives. Thank you so much again for the invitation. I would like to thank Professor Moses for this opportunity, and I'm sorry that I took longer than I expected. But my call, and I think the Palestinian, we all call for to end the war now, not tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wesam. Thanks to you for this magnificent presentation and for data that you have collected for building your arguments in a very consistent and academic manner in order to suggest some actions to counter these hegemonic narratives. I will request to my students to participate, sending questions or uh, suggesting some feedbacks to your presentation. But before, I would like to comment and offer some thoughts about your presentation. I want to say again, thank you, because it's not very often in Mexico or in Latin America to have this kind of information, this kind of presentation, given the fact that the most of mass media in Mexico come from, these owners of mass media and hegemonic media come from the United States. The most of people used to be informed by CNN, by Fox News, and other, actors from American mass media, where Israeli pro-Zionist actors not only are the owners, but also uh, export the headlines and the editions of the headlines of newspapers, Twitter accounts, or X accounts now, or social media profiles, and sometimes it's very difficult for people in Latin America and specifically way in Mexico to have this chance to break this hegemonic narrative coming from the US mass media. Sometimes, and with the coming of social media and independent journalists and researchers, sometimes we have the opportunity to offer a critique to these Hasbara projects in Latin America and in other parts of the world. But this is an amazing opportunity to change thoughts with you as a specialist in critical discourse analysis. This is the most important thing to me, to have an expert of the critical discourse analysis in order to share with my students and colleagues uh, who are interested in these issues. The first thing I want to say, Dr. Wesam, is the role of public sphere in this issue. The power reproduces itself in the mind of people. That's why it's important what you say about labeling as an act of power. Labeling as an act of power, where the space of dispute is the mind of people, and how the mind of people can produce and reproduce this hegemonic narrative, or on the other hand, to break this kind of reproduction is in order to find another way to thinking and other way to see the world. It's like the glasses that I use in my classes to offer the panoramic view of the world. If you change the glasses, it's better if you can see the world with many glasses as you can, in order to have a more open perspective of not only the Palestinian conflict, but also many other conflicts that you can see, even that you mentioned the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, in which many people used to do many conferences, many covers media in order to criticize what's happened with Russia. But when the Palestinian Israeli conflict, emerged in the public sphere, nobody wants to talk about so much about what's happening, and if they do it with this hegemonic narrative that you have mentioned. The second issue I want to share is that we have to also decolonize the words and the vocabulary that we use in order to make analysis, critiques, papers, and comments about what's happening in Palestine, given the suffering of people and the necessity to have an independent state for Palestine in order to achieve more peaceful Middle East. If we can achieve this goal in the short term, the colonial vocabulary that we have in your magnificent presentation. We have words like war, conflict, humanitarian issue, terrorism, crisis. Everything is crisis, humanitarian crisis. But people is, starting to speak about genocide, occupation, colonial process, resistance, and other vocabulary which is very useful to break this other hegemonic vocabulary. And the third issue is the question of dehumanization. I am agree with you in order to, to put in a weak form the credibility to the other. But sometimes these hegemonic mass media, they do the hegemonization of the other as a previous stage to the justification of killing people. And this is very, very sensitive issue because dehumanization appears as a normal labeling in many Israeli mass media. Even the people of the government, this right-wing government, as Smotrich, as Ben-Gvir, and many others, just to use the dehumanization vocabulary in the everyday form of conducting the narrative to the audience as a normal issue in everyday. And it's very sensitive to me to see how the people receive these dehumanization narratives every day with fake news, with intelligence, artificial intelligence, fake news, and propaganda issues every day. And issues like the raping women, the issue of the babies, and so many others are the arguments of this dehumanization of the other. Well, I would like to ask you my first question in order that my students can, share with us their reflections, their thoughts. In your opinion, Dr. Wesam, what are the most important websites to follow an alternative narrative of hegemonic media? I mean, some media in Palestine, in English or in Arabic, newspapers in the Middle East, apart from Al Jazeera, because now Al Jazeera is a very important, project. It's a very visible narrative around the world, even not at all in Latin America, but in many Western countries. But the most important is in the Middle East. But apart from Al Jazeera English and Al Jazeera Arabic, what other Palestinian, Egyptian, Iraqi, and mass media you can suggest to us in order to take this responsibility to look for the information in a very autonomous manner? This is my first question, and I will request for my students to chat our questions, or even if they want to raise their hand in order to participate with us. Dr. Wesam, please.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Moses. And yeah, I'd like your comments and feedback. And it's always my pleasure to share academic and personal insights and observation about Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and also about the current Israeli war, attack, aggression on our people in the Gaza Strip. I should have mentioned that I had experienced the war for 5 weeks, and I have to say there is no. It was really very risky, very difficult time, and of course, we did not feel safe at all during that time. And of course, maybe I'm personally I'm a bit lucky that I was able to evacuate and leave Gaza, but still the rest of my family, brothers and sisters, friends, relatives, neighbors, still there, and they still face or experience the the war. When talking to them, it's really when I get a chance actually to talk to them, because the internet connection is not stable at all. If we can talk to them like every once a week or twice a week, then we are really very lucky to have this a chance to talk to family, and to follow up the news. For example, I was really so much saddened today to hear about the building of my family and how it is destroyed, and all this roundabout which I showed in the picture. Like seeing these images, coming from friends and relatives. It's really awful to see. It's not the buildings, it's the memories that we had in Gaza and in our building, in our area. As it's not about the stones. It's about the memories, it's about the life, it's about the experience that we had in Gaza, and of course in the neighborhood where I lived. I do agree with your comment that during the first months of the Russian-Ukrainian war, I've seen many invitations and many calls for academic conferences. It's not only in the media, but also in academia. Many international academics with a lot of funding and money, even like to call speakers and presenters to come and pay for them, just suddenly like every single academic education institution talking about, like organizing events, workshops, symposiums, academic conferences, and so on. But unfortunately, so far, we have not seen any international academic conference um, organized for the purpose to analyze, the Israeli war on Gaza. And I found your invitation, and this meeting is very important. And I'm very thankful to you and to your colleagues at the university, and also for the attendees to come here and to share some knowledge. Also, I'm very happy to answer some questions. I don't see it's like an academic lecture, but I would love to get feedback and to get questions, and we are to exchange knowledge about Gaza war. Of course, the humanitarian approach, humanizing approach is very important. We see like the Western media humanizes the Israeli casualties. They talk about as Israeli women, babies. They talk about hostages in Gaza. But for us, I mean, it's not for like for many, for Hamas, basically, these are not hostages. These are captives, because they are basically soldiers. And you see like the play with the words, hostages or captives, and they are soldiers, how they are like they are, but these hostages are basically referred as civilians in mainly, and I think like in major Western media outlets. And this will take me to answer your question, like alternative media outlet, about from Al Jazeera, Arabic or English. I would say social media platforms would be one option, would be an alternative platform to learn about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general, and on Gaza, on the current Gaza war. There are many pages, there are many esteemed journalists who report daily on Gaza war. One of these journalists is called Musab Azaiza. He was in Gaza until like 10 days, maybe, or 1 week, because uh, yeah, he was evacuated to Qatar. While Dahdouh, also Al Jazeera correspondent in Gaza, is a public figure, and I think now he becomes a well-known international reporter. In terms of websites, I would say Al Middle East Eye and Middle East Monitor. These also report on the Gaza war on a daily basis. At least if these websites, and media outlets would give us a different views on the conflict. We don't have to agree with them, we don't have to support their coverage, but at least if we want to learn the other side of the conflict, the other narrative, the other side of the narrative, or the other side of the coin, I think like we need to look for other media outlets, but I mean like media outlets other than the international news agencies like AB or Reuters or CNN and so on. Um, Unfortunately, and this is one of the major Palestinian problem, is that so far in Palestine, we do not have any English speaking foreign media, Of course, Reuters, AB, many international news agencies work in Gaza, but an independent Palestinian media agency that publishes news in English, unfortunately, so far we do not have. And this is one of the major problems and challenges that Palestinians face. And maybe like together with Palestine supporters, maybe we find ways to think of like having such a platform to raise awareness on Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Well, thank you very much. And I am taking notes about these websites. Some of them we use it, and others, but we don't know. I will try to.
Musab Azaiza. Yeah.
Asaisa, yes. This,
Musab
this,
Azaiza.
for example, this is the one that I don't know, but it's very interesting to know names of people who are trying to feed the public sphere, the counterbalance, no? With
Yeah, I think like Musab has millions of followers on YouTube, on social media platforms. Like he becomes really a figure and a Palestinian voice from Gaza. Uh, um, uh, yeah, he reported on daily basis. Of course, his family was killed and targeted in the war. He went to report about destroying and targeting a house, but then he found his family.
yeah, okay. Thank you very
Mhm.
much, Sam.
Yep.
I have one comment from Professor Susana Mangana from Uruguay, who is following this conference, and I would like to read the message. She says, "Is agree with that we must all of be aware of the Israeli narratives. I'm truly worried also about the other type of dispossession vis-a-vis Palestinians, which is the fact that by linking the cause to Hamas all the time, Israelis have managed to link the idea of Palestinian identity to Islam and to terrorism. And that is something that the Western media constantly buys, and it impacts public opinion because it distorts the Palestinian cause altogether. This is the comment of Professor Susana. Some people is asking to quit the screen sharing, please, Wesam, in order to make the image. Thank you very much, Wesam. Thank you. And we have one question about Chomsky. About Chomsky. Chomsky is known because he refuses the BDS, and people just want to know your opinion about using the quotations and the ideas of Chomsky, even if he doesn't support BDS. I don't know if you have one opinion, one question about, or one comment about this idea, Dr. Wesam.
All right. Okay. I think like for framing Hamas or Palestinian resistance as terrorist, or in the frame of terrorism, this is not really new. At least for any resistance movement, and also this kind of frame is always associated with Muslims or Arabs who resist, the American or Israel or Western imperialism or Western, fight. I don't want to go for these big titles or big, terms. But I wrote actually two papers or three papers about, about Hamas and about ISIS. And, part of my one project I worked on is the way ISIS uses social media to mobilize and how it is labeled always as terrorism, as a terrorist group. And I think like also for Hamas, it's always labeled as terrorist group, but still, from my point of view, and knowing some context about Hamas, I think they are mostly pragmatic. Hamas is a pragmatic movement. Of course, some members, some part of Hamas is radical. We can't deny that fact, but still, Hamas can adapt its attitudes to the regional, international politics. In the last few years, I would say maybe like 2020, since 2020, Hamas shows much more pragmatics into dealing with regional powers. It was very open to the Egyptian regime, to Saudi regimes, and it has much connection with the United Nations and international figures. I would say here that Hamas was responsible for mediating the conflict in 2020 and 2021, when there were some escalations between Israel and Islamic Jihad. Hamas actually was responsible for mediating these escalations, even though it was put on the blacklist. But this means that even though Hamas is recognized as terrorist group, it is still a pragmatic, And of course, with the attacks with the events of October 7th, Hamas shows the other side. It was a big surprise for everyone, for us in Gaza, maybe for all Palestinians, and of course for everyone interested and aware of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For Chomsky, if he supports BDS or not, everyone has his or her views, So but at least Chomsky is I would say like he's a pro-Palestine. He's active and he defends, the Palestinian views. And from his language to his theories in media or in language studies, he always shows that the power of language and of course the power of media and its reflection on society.
Thank you, Dr. Wesam. So, connecting your thoughts about what's happening with Hamas, I think one of the most important problems that we have in many Western audiences and in Latin American audiences is the lack of knowledge about Hamas and what is the constituency and the structure of this political actor. Because as you know, and following your arguments, most of hegemonic media has to reproduce the images of Hamas as a monolith, a monolithic actor, terrorist actor, and this is an obstacle to break the importance to know what is the structure of a pragmatism in one important political actor like Hamas. I don't know if you agree, but something similar happened with the Taliban in Afghanistan issue after 20 years of military occupation by the United States. The most of people used to know the Taliban as a whole, hermetic movement, terrorist movement, and the most of people, didn't know the structure and the groups inside the Taliban, between, mediators, pragmatism, and radical, and many other components of this political actor. At the end, the United States and with the presidency of Donald Trump, they at the end they had to negotiate it with them and to make a political agreement and a political solution in Afghanistan. I know it's not the same scenario that we have in Palestine and Afghanistan. It's not the same. Of course, it's very different. We have many other elements, but it's just one example in order to know how the people how do we know to know the importance of the structure of political actors. It's not the same Khaled Meshal or Haniyeh or Sinwar and many other actors who are their own conception of what is the mission of Hamas and what is the conception of Hamas and the connections with other political actors like Israel and the regional actors. This is very important to know and to keep in mind. I have one intervention by Professor Susana Mangana. I would like to take the floor for her. Professor Susana, thank you very much for being here. Please, thank you.
Please. Thank you both. Can you hear me properly? I'm very stuck with a cold, so that's why my video was closed. But thank you. شكرا جزيلا يا أستاذ يا وسام. أنا مبسوطة جدا إن أنت معنا اليوم. Bueno, muchas gracias y también a ti, Moisés, por la invitación. Sorry, I will just continue in English, but according to what you just said, Moisés, I just want to add that not only we lack information, we don't really know now how the correlation of forces, internal political forces are within Gaza and within the West Bank. So very quickly, I know this could be it could lead us into another whole conference, Wesam, but can you please tell us how the correlation of forces are today, the internal politics within Gaza and also with the Palestinian Authority in the Dafeh, in the West Bank? And I know it's very difficult because sometimes, especially journalists demand this, they request this from us academics, and we don't know what to say really. But can you imagine what will the day after the end of the war, when they declare that it's the end of the war, can you imagine how it could be, how, I don't know, I mean, what's the role that the Al-Fatah and the Palestinian Authority is ready to play there in Gaza, if any? And also, I'm very disappointed with European countries, of course, without saying, but with the US, I don't expect much from them. But I'm also truly disappointed with the Arab countries. I know the Arab League doesn't function. Halas, it's dead, and we should forget it. But what about, I mean, the current ongoing situation, the suffering of the children of the Palestinian people? I mean, I just don't see Qatar or don't see the Saudis, really taking action and saying we can't continue with this. It's not just retrieving the ambassador. I know I'm demanding too many things in 1-2 questions, but internal politics within Moises, within the state of Palestine now, well, if we can call it like that, and also what about the day after, and how do you see the response, the lack of response, I should say, on the Arab side? Okay, thank you very much to both of you.
All right, okay, if I may. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Susanna. Okay. All right,
yes,
thank
that's
you.
okay.
أهلا وسهلا. أهلا وسهلا.
أهلا بك.
Okay, I will come back to your actually to your questions, but I would like to just quickly reflect on Moses' point about Taliban, Daesh, and the difference between Taliban and Hamas is that Hamas is a Palestinian national movement, fighting for the liberation of Palestinian people, and as it claims, Hamas aims to establish a free Palestine, a free and independent free Palestine state. This is like the ultimate goal of Hamas. I also one important point, I don't want to say like I'm advocating Hamas views and so on, but I would like here to give a different perspectives, from what we learn from international media and to raise awareness. So this doesn't mean that I support or I do agree much with some Hamas's views, but at least here I'm here today to reflect on some academic analysis and of course to raise awareness about, at least or show different perspectives and different viewpoints. Regarding the internal relation between Gaza and the West Bank, between Fatah and Hamas, like here, just briefly, Hamas took over Gaza in 2006 because of several reasons. Hamas won the elections in 2006, as I have explained, in a very democratic way, but Hamas has never been given a chance or opportunity to form any government, Hamas was elected also because of the high corruption of the Palestinian Authority figures. And personally, I noticed that and observe it on daily basis, how much some figures of the Palestinian Authority were corrupted. Also, there was association between Fatah Party, Fatah movement, and the Palestinian Authority. I would say Fatah Party or Fatah movement was involved indirectly and directly into the Palestinian Authority until the Palestinian Authority becomes the head or the umbrella of Fatah Party. And this means that this reduces the high level of political attitudes of Fatah into the Palestinian actions and the Palestinian political life, and this leads to disappear of the role of the PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization. Of course, there were some attempts to reconciliate the division between Fatah and Hamas, and there were many initiatives, but unfortunately, none of these initiatives was successful so far until we find the big events and the most surprising and shocking events in October the 7th. During the war, before going the day after, but I think like before, at the moment, like during the 4 last months, the situation between Fatah Party, between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas was not really stable. There is much disappointment on the Palestinian level towards the Palestinian Authority because the Palestinian Authority in general and publicly prevents any demonstration in the West Bank, like preventing any Palestinian to take any action, any even peaceful actions against against Israel or to go for a protest or something like this. We have seen some police guards, preventing demonstrations and so on. Also, the Palestinian Authority does not take any action towards the Palestinians in Gaza. We see all the announcements, all sayings into media, but so far there is nothing on the ground, and this makes the gap between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas so huge and so big. Well, actually, the what we hear now and what we notice in the ceasefire negotiations, like what kind of role Hamas wants to play, and if Hamas can or would like to consider such roles to be given to the Palestinian Authority, and and this would reflect actually the conflict between Fatah Party, Palestinian Authority, and Hamas, and this is, from my point of view, is one of the major challenges that we find for ending the war. Now, like this is one of the challenge, I think one of the the issue that they are talking about in the negotiation, in the like ceasefire negotiations, who is going to rule Gaza and who is going to be responsible on Gaza. But so far we see some declarations by some Palestinian by some figures of Palestinian Authority, but they were condemned because they started condemning Hamas, especially a sheikh, I forget his name, but he was highly criticized, and but then he kind of revised himself and so on. What will happen the next day? What the situation would look like? Everything in Gaza is destroyed, mostly. The infrastructure, the electricity, the higher education system, the education system, the schools, the homes. I think it will take long time to rebuild the whole Gaza. And reconstruction will take long time. Also, it's not about political governance in Gaza, but it's still about the humanitarian situation and the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. What we see now, what we always ask about is that where people can go when the war is over, when people go to their homes and they don't find the homes, they either go into tents or they go into UNRWA school shelters. And most of the UNRWA school shelters have already been destroyed, either completely or partially. This is something that we should to consider. We should consider, like when thinking about the second day or the next day of the war. Talking about the hospitals and all medical system in Gaza is destroyed. Mostly the hospitals run on fuel, and Israel still prevents or allowing any fuel tanks into Gaza. So how Zovizo, as we don't know, we don't think about electricity, to be honest with you. Electricity has gone for not only for months, but maybe for years and years. Imagine as an academic, and I had to work to prepare for my lectures or to continue to do my research, and I only have 4 to 5 or 6, maximum 6 hours of electricity per day. So I have the rest of the day, without electricity. Of course, there were other alternatives. People relied on electric generators, but of course, they need fuel, and these are also expensive. So not too many people in Gaza could actually afford to buy fuel for the generators. Many for women and babies and children, what they do and what they can do. I think one generation in Gaza either is lost or will be lost, unfortunately. If we're talking about the children, the school children, facing such, war, they will not only face losing buildings or schools but also they will face the psychological trauma, the psychological implications on them, and of course on their families. Imagine when a child loses his father, mother, brothers and sisters, and he's the only survival in his family. How he would see the life, how could he survive without his family? And I think there are thousands of children now will live without their parents. So everything I don't want to say it is everything is like complicated. It is complicated. It is complex, but still, Palestinians live with a hope. We know that we sacrifice to for the next generations to at least hopefully and inshallah have their own independent state.
Thank you very much.
Inshallah, Wesam, inshallah.
Yeah, I would like to comment that the reflections of Professor Susana is important because now we are in the middle of the conflict, or in the middle of the genocide, actions by Israeli army, because tension is what is the most consistent feeling in the people in the environment, because the real plan in my humble opinion is try to displace the most amount of people to the south, to the Sinai, in order to expand the
To
strategic.
force Egypt, I think, Moises, in order to force Egypt to let them
Yes.
enter Egypt. I think that's the idea. I
Yes.
agree with you totally.
Of course, because Israel have many strategic and geopolitical projects in Gaza Strip. One channel connecting Mediterranean Sea with the Red Sea, Ben Gurion,
The Leviathan, also the gas,
the Leviathan,
yeah, prospections, everything.
of course, and of course the demographic issue is one of the challenge for the Israeli project. So now the tension is in order to see. I mean, the conflict is not finished. On the contrary,
No.
we are in the tension of the conflict, despite of the amount of people who is dying, suffering, and the promotion and representation of this conflict in the mass media, as the Dr. Wesam has argued. The tension is if Egypt will permit the displacement of these people in the next months, considering the political internal arena of the Fatah al-Sisi politics and the complicity of other regional actors, mainly Arabic states.
Yeah.
So,
what's
yes.
your opinion, Moises? What's your opinion, yours and Professor Wesam's opinion about how the other Middle Eastern countries, not just Turkey, but also the Gulf countries, are reacting to this? Do you think they will try to do something more assertive, or will they still play, dog and cat? What do you think that they will do in the next weeks, let's say?
I don't know if Dr. Wesam wants to ask or.
Okay, I think this is a very important point, and I think also it relates to your previous point about my opinion and my feelings about the Arab countries. Actually, I forgot to comment on that, and think I'm very, not only me, but I think like many Palestinians would agree with me. We are very disappointed about their reaction and their engagement in the conflict. But many like Palestinian officials do not or refrain to speak their opinions in a way because it's like a diplomacy and politics and so on. So they refrain from talking frankly and openly to the Arab countries in general. But here I'd like to greet my student Dima Madi, who is in Rafah now. Actually, she's one of my students, and she is joining us from Rafah, from Gaza. And she wrote here her comment: from my point of view, the war will start after the end of the war on Gaza, whether the psychological or physical war. And greetings to Dima and to all students in Gaza. So when people return to their homes, which spent all of their efforts and age to build it, and in a blink of eye, everything disappeared. And this is the point I was talking about. Like when the war is over and tomorrow, where people can go. It's not about the stones, it's about the building, it's about the family connection, it's about the memories, it's about the happiness, it's about the sadness, it's about every single thing in our life. And of course, for the whole people in Gaza. Back to, and this is like, okay, back to the comment on solution. As I said in my presentation, the major international response is a humanitarian response, as if the catastrophe is a natural one and needs a humanitarian aids. Look at the UN resolutions, the United States engagement, the Arab officials, the Arab countries' engagement, the Gulf countries, the Egypt, Jordan, and others, only they focus on the humanitarian supplies and humanitarian aid to the people. This is important. Or they say like this is not important. This is very, very important. This is very necessary. But this is not the only solution. We need to think of something more sustainable, more permanent, and more doable for both parties, for Israelis and Palestinians. In Palestine, we do not claim that we want a solution for us, for only Palestinians, but also we want to have a solution for Israelis. Why don't we have two states living, and I don't say that together, but at least next to each other in a peaceful way, in less violent, no violence at all. Where is the problem? I can't still, understand why don't we have like two-state solution, or even one-state solution. I'm not about that, but personally, I don't agree with one-state solution anyway. But for two-state solution, like having two independent and free states living next to each other, each one, each country, each state, people, and then build, all this kind of agreement together or not. This is like, maybe that's one of my perspective for the solution. So it's not about humanitarian solution as the international community respond to the current war, because we are not hunger people. We don't look for food. It's not our target is to find bread or just water. We want to have our own independent and free state, simply like any people, any country in the world. So why only the Palestinians don't have the right to establish their state? Is there any problem with the Palestinians? And of course, Palestinians are lovely people. And we understand, okay, our major conflict is with Israel because Israel occupies Palestine and still refuses to go seriously in any political solution. I think during Arafat's era, there was a big chance for a peaceful solution. Of course, Yasser Arafat has a great symbolism in Palestine, and during his time, I think there was a very large and potential solution, including all the Arab countries or Gulf countries that would also support the political solution.
Dr. Wesam, and I want to tell welcome to Dima Madi, who's connecting from Gaza, as Dr. Wesam mentioned. I agree. I mean, every Arab state has its own political interest, and the most of people in the Arab elites have a double standard discourse, which is something that we have to analyze also, because they say something in the public space, in the public sphere, but at the same time they conducting politics in other direction. But anyway, the injustice and the lack of peaceful environment in Gaza, in West Bank, and in Israel is the same challenge to all Middle East, because any war in Palestine, Israel, in Syria, in Yemen is always a challenge to every political elite in not only in the Arab countries but also in the Middle East. That's why we start to talk or to speak about a regional war, because every time is more dangerous. Every day is more dangerous, even for the political elites. So, in my humble opinion, the political elites, I understand they have political interests, they have investments, they have a lot of care for the status quo. But at the same time, if the projection is expanding or sustaining the war, is something very dangerous for themselves. That's why I agree with Susana and Professor Susana and Professor Wesam, in order that sooner or later, some political elites will have to participate in one peaceful political agreement because their own interest of survival, political survival. This is, in my humble opinion. I don't know when, I don't know how, but in order to see how this the connection of interest in a very dynamic region, sooner or later they will have to participate in one project like this. And I would like to mention Dima's comment. As she said before, every corner of the house has a special memory and a special story in Palestine. This is something that she wrote now, and I'm very happy and honored to have in the audience people who are sharing their thoughts from the other part of the world. So, Dr. Amer.
Yeah, sorry. Also, I do agree with you and with the Professor Susanna. But to ask your question or to comment, like I think when we see a real shift in the international public sphere, and of course in politics, and how we need to get more and more and more engaged into international media, into academic work, into negotiations with politicians. We need to have an impact and effect actually on these, not entities, but these, powers. Also, if you allow me to welcome Dr. Yahya Ashur. He's from Gaza also, but now he was also evacuated from Gaza. Also, I would like to welcome Dr. Noor, Muhammad Noor. She's from Malaysia, also joining us today. So, and also I would like to welcome all friends. I can't see the whole list, but everyone who's joining us, I'm very happy. Okay, so yeah, I think like we need to see a real change in the public, in the international public opinion, and of course, this would not happen without any efforts. One is to engage much with word on international media, with journalists, and of course, organizing academic conferences would be another way. Civil demonstrations also raise awareness. Maybe it's not that much if it's not covered, but still, demonstrations at least have some pressure or would have some pressure on politicians.
Dr. Wesam, Dr. Susana, Professor Yahya and Dima, and all of my students, thank you very much for being here with us. I don't want to abuse of the time of Professor Wesam, even the time of you. So I just like to finish saying thank you, Dr. Wesam, for your presentation. This is the first thing that I want to say. This is very important for us, having your time, your expertise, and your way of thinking, considering as an expert of critical discourse. So the first thing I want to say, thank you very much for your time and your effort. Second issue is to thank to all of my colleagues and students, Professor Susana from Uruguay, who's connecting. Thank you very much for your comments and feedbacks, very useful. I hope we can keep in touch to, as we said before, working together in order to put publications, conferences, and these manners that Dr. Wesam suggested in the how and in the when of the issue. So this is some of our responsibility as an academics and as a human beings, as a people who is interested in social sciences. And at the end, thank you very much to the colleagues of the Center of Asian and African Studies of the Colegio de Mexico who are supporting in the connection, in the transmission via YouTube, and all of the people who has followed this event. Dr. Wesam, please keep in touch, and thank you very much. I will deliver your certificate of gratitude. I really appreciate your time and effort to be here with us, and we can repeat these kind of events as you want, when you want, and with the people who can join us. Thank you very much, Dr. Wesam, and see you later. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much also, Professor Moses, for this great opportunity. I'm very happy to meet you and to meet the colleagues here and your students. I'm always happy to cooperate with anyone, with all colleagues, to participate in academic papers or even to for some consultation here and there. And my email was, you can share my email or my WhatsApp number with all colleagues and students. I'm very happy to answer their questions in a private way as well. Thank you so much.
We will do it.
We can continue working together, Professor Wesam and Professor Moises. You know that very well. I'm already engaged here where I am, but I mean, we can still hope for more, more conferences in order to create awareness. Okay. Thank you. Thank you to all.
We will do it. Thank you very much. See you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.